We are just over halfway through this year, and somehow, and I don't know how this has happened, but somehow for the first time in years, I have finally finished my reading goal for the year. Every year, I basically set this much higher. Let's just say that I overestimate how much reading I can get done in a year. I'm very ambitious. I always think, yes, I can manage that this year. And it just never happens. Either I get into a reading slump, or because I have to read so much for university, at the end of the day, I am just exhausted and I just cannot even comprehend ingesting more information. But something's happened this year. And I don't know if it's because last year I really discovered audiobooks for the first time, and I discovered that you can listen to audiobooks on like Spotify and you can rent them from the library, and there are different apps that you can either buy audiobooks from, which you can keep re-listening to, or that you can rent audiobooks from. And I'm definitely more on the renting side, so I've gone for more of those plans. But for the first time ever in like years, I have made my reading goal, not only in the year that I set it, but like months before the end of the year, and I am just shocked. So I'm very excited, I'm very happy about this, and I thought that we could talk about it and reflect on it, because I wasn't expecting this. I was kind of expecting at the end of the year to be rushing through as many Christmas books as I could to be able to make the goal by the end of the year, but somehow we're in July and I've already not only met it but exceeded it, because I actually passed it. I think beginning of June is when I passed my reading goal, so I'm very happy about that, and I thought that we could go through it today. I'm using two different apps to track the books that I read. The one that I primarily use is Fable, but it's not the best for stats, I have to say, if you're on the free version. I am here on Fable. I'll put the account up here so that if you want to come follow me and join me on Fable, please do, because it is a lot of fun. The one thing I do like about Fable is that you can track your daily reading streak, and so I've got that on the front cover of my phone so that I can log it each day. And because I quite like, I guess, the community side of Fable, I really enjoy, and so that's why I'm on there. But in terms of the actual stats side of it, I much prefer the story graph. I will just read this out quickly first, because the cool thing about Fable is that it provides you a summary based on your reading style. And so apparently, I'm a brave romantic. Your reading explores love's battles, whether found in a fantasy fight or a passionate sci-fi struggle. From the safety of your reading chair, your imagination roams through epic and emotional stories. And it's so interesting seeing how that changes throughout the year. I seem to, for some reason, have like themes for each year of books that I'm currently into. I remember when I started rediscovering my love for reading about 2 years ago, I was super into like crime and thriller and mystery, and it's not the best thing to go running through the woods when you're listening to, for example, Good Girl's Guide to Murder, where she's trying to figure out who done it, and you're running through the woods trying not to imagine that somebody's running after you. Wouldn't recommend it, but it does make you keep to a good running pace. So for that year, for some reason, I was just super into that, and I don't know if it's because it was the high tension page turning that was really getting me back into reading. But over the last 2 years, I feel like I've reverted back a lot more to the reading style that I've always been most drawn to, and that is fantasy. Interestingly enough, I think because I'm reading such a dense stuff for university, I'm struggling to get into the really, really dense fantasy books, and so I'm giving myself a little bit of grace with those ones and reading them when I'm in the mood for them. For example, if you've been here for any of my book videos, you'll know that I'm currently going through, I don't know if you can see that, I'm currently going through the Wheel of Time series, and I'm absolutely loving it. But I'm realizing that for me, it's not the kind of story that I can sit down and just like read in one go. It's very dense, it's a lot of world building, and so I'm kind of just reading it when I'm in the mood for it. On the other side of what I have ended up going towards when I'm taking a break from this is romantasy. And this is something that I really only discovered last year. I had a colleague who put me on to Fourth Wing, which was a book that I was avoiding for the longest time, because I have actually read Rebecca Yarros's other books, her non-fantasy books, and I really, really liked them. And I had no trust that someone who could write amazing romance books and contemporary romance books could switch to fantasy. But I've realized that I'm just not that like hardcore fantasy compared to some other people. I guess you could say like purists who only want like the Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, Dune, those kinds of things, rather than I guess the more like romance, soft fantasy side of things. And I've realized this year, as I've been reading more and more of these books, that I am just someone who appreciates both depending on the mood that I'm in, which is totally fine. And so that's most of what my books are going to be this year. As you will see, there are a few mixed in there depending on what my mood was like. Like I do remember, and I haven't looked at this, so this is just running off memory. I do remember when I was in America, we went to the beach for a few days, and one of those days I just dedicated to reading. Part of it was getting over jet lag, and that I woke up at 3 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep, and so I decided to pick up a book. And since it was 3 o'clock in the morning, I didn't really want to be reading hard fantasy, and so I picked up a summer book on Kindle Unlimited and I read that in one day. But aside from that, I don't think there are many other genres. So I'm curious to see what happens. Of course, there will still be like the crime, mystery mixed in there, and especially because this year I've been trying to focus on reading my physical TBR because it's here and I wanted to get the books for a reason. And so I do know that there's going to be some of these books mixed in there as well. But yeah, I'm excited to see what is here and like what I've been rating things, because genuinely I feel like I've only been reading pretty decent books this year. There's a few of them, like there's one series which we'll get to that I didn't end up finishing because it started off bad. It then had a huge jump up for the second book. Bad as in like the storyline was just hooking enough to keep me going, but I didn't love the writing style and I wasn't entirely convinced by everything. But I did, because of the storyline and because of the cliffhanger, go on to book 2, and book 2 was so much better, and then it just went downhill and downhill, and the last book that I read was kind of just average. And so I haven't continued with that, for example. But most other books I seem to remember having been pretty decent. So yeah, let's go through this together and see what comes up. So apparently I've read 35 books for this year, and my goal was 30 books. So I am shocked, absolutely shocked that I've made it July and I've already read 35 books. So I'm thinking I might increase it to 50 books for the end of the year, and we'll just see how it goes, because I've already met my hard goal. I'm not going to be so pressured to hit the 50 books mark, but I don't know, it's something else to work towards, I think. So I read 35 books and approximately 17,331 pages. Obviously, this is the estimate based on the edition, and I don't think I've updated all of the editions that I should have. Moods, primarily adventurous. I'm not surprised about that. There are, I think, 23, what did they say? 23 books based on adventure. That's kind of cool. Pretty excited about that. And then my next top one is emotional. Makes sense because of the romantasy. Dark, again, I'm assuming that's because of the romantasy. Yeah, it's got like all of the dark academia, the romantasy books, fantasy books, and then all of the like crime, dystopian, all of those things. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Pace, medium pace. Do you know, I guess I'm always surprised that the majority of the books that I read are medium pace, because like the Wheel of Time, for example, I would count as a very slow paced book. And then I seem to go from that to like crime thrillers that are fast paced. But this time I've got 86% of them are medium books. And so maybe that's all of the romantasy books put in there, because I wouldn't call them fast paced, like Onyx Storm, any of the Crescent City, but even Crescent City I would almost class as slow. But none of them are slow. So maybe it's just my understanding of slow is wrong. It's actually medium. And that if it was an actual slow book, it would be very slow. What's a slow book then? I'm actually genuinely questioning that, because I genuinely thought that I had some slow books, but no, 86% medium, 14% fast. Page number, apparently 49% of the books that I've read are 500 pages plus. That is tragic. How have I read this many books this year? And they've all been extremely long books. Okay, no, I lie. It's because I've been listening to so many audiobooks. Literally all of the books on here that are the long books are all of the audiobooks that I've listened to. Oh, there is one physical book and the rest is audiobooks. Okay, that's how I've been getting through so many, because I've been listening to audiobooks pretty much non-stop when I've been doing the dishes, when I've been on public transport, when I've been doing data entry at university. Like, it's been a lot of audiobooks. So I'm curious to see, actually, I think it tells you edition formats. I'm curious to see what the format divide is going to be. Apparently, I've read a non-fiction book this year, which I'm curious to see. That was so stupid. Okay, so one of my favorite authors of all time, who I don't always rate his books 5 stars, but I feel like they're always the kind of books that I am thinking about for a long time afterwards. And so I'll always buy his books. This is John Green. I'm obsessed with John Green, from his like fiction, hard-hitting books, which is all about like mental health and all of that, and then his non-fiction like thoughts on the world. I'm in love with him, and he came out with a book this year called Everything is Tuberculosis. I wasn't the biggest fan of the writing style in this book because it was a lot of repetition, and it was quite for the length of the book, I didn't feel like he said a lot, but the way he presented the information that he had was so accessible, and I learned so much about this and really felt quite shocked that I didn't previously know anything about tuberculosis and how prevalent it still is in our world, that it's something that is just stuck with me. And apparently that's my one non-fiction book for the year. I remember one of my goals for last year was to read more non-fiction, and it kept putting me into reading slumps, unless it's something like that, which is really, really captivating. And I think it's because I have to read so much history for my studies that I struggle to be interested in anything outside of that, because it's just too much information loading. Anyway, the rest of it has been fiction. And now we get to the genres. This is like my favorite part of this whole thing. I have read 24 fantasy books this year, and considering that I've only read 35 books this year, that means there are 11 that had nothing to do with fantasy. You can seriously tell that that is the bent that I'm going down at the moment. 20 romance books. That does make sense, because if they haven't been romantasy books, then I have read like that summer beachy read, and that was romance as well. Young adult 5. I don't even know what young adult books I've read. Oh, okay, no, I lie. So I'm currently reading a series by Holly Black called The Folk of the Air. The first book is actually here. Ow, right behind me. I had an injection yesterday, so my arm is pretty sore. There we go. The Cruel Prince. I loved this book. Let me tell you, I loved this book. I felt like when I finished it, it didn't end on such a cliffhanger that I needed to pick up the next book instantly. And because I was trying to finish books on my bookshelf, I didn't go to the next one. But I have since moved on to the next books in the series. I've only got them as ebooks. They are delightful. I'm absolutely loving them. And so I kind of wish that when I finish this, I'd moved on to the next ones, but it's okay because I am enjoying them now. And they are young adult. So I've got the second book, and there's like a in-between book between the first and the second that I listened to as an audiobook, of course. And then the John Green ones are also young adult. And then the Hunger Games Sunrise on the Reaping came out this year. And that is also technically young adult, though I don't... I mean, I get it because nothing overly graphic happens, either like sexually or gory. But it's still like such a... like it messes with your mind so much that sometimes I forget that it is young adult. And then we have 4 contemporary books, which is interesting. I generally read a few more contemporary books, I have to say. I guess if it's only romance books, I don't really read anything else. Even if it's young adult, it's generally more on the fantasy side of it. But yeah, that does make sense. 2 of the 4 contemporary books are the summer reads that I read at the beach. So that does make sense. And then format. Interesting, only 43% of the books that I've read have been audio. I'm wondering if I categorized them wrong. What have been the digital books maybe? I have read quite a few ebooks this year, because if I've been trying to read a physical book, it's been something on my physical TBR, and so I've been trying not to buy too many more books, so I've been doing a lot on the ebooks from my library or from Kindle. That's actually true. So I'm just going to talk about this in a bit, but I started reading Sarah J Maas's books this year. I'm assuming based on how many I've read that it's going to be my most read author this year. But I do remember, so I did ACOTAR via audiobook, absolutely loved it, and I really want to buy the series because I think audio for the first time was so immersive, especially because I did the graphic audio versions, which I would highly recommend to anyone. Like the music going on in the background, the fact that there are different readers for different characters, like it honestly felt like their tagline, which is a movie in your mind. I absolutely loved graphic audio. Graphic audio has also done the Crescent City series, which I actually have up here. Recently bought that for my birthday for myself. And the Crescent City series through graphic audio was amazing, but the very last segment, because they split, one book is generally 2 different audiobooks. Second book of the final book in the series was not yet released by graphic audio, and so I did finish that, but I classed it as audiobook because the majority of it was audiobook. I then moved on to Throne of Glass, and graphic audio is currently in the process of recording those, and I didn't really want to wait because I'm pretty sure it takes like half a year to a year for them to release each audiobook, and I wanted to read the series. And so I picked up the audiobook, which is recorded by, I don't know if it's going to be on here. I don't know what her name is, I'm going to be honest. Elizabeth someone. I'll put it up on the screen and I'll find it. I'm not generally very picky about audiobook voices or narrators. I really do not like her as a narrator, and I feel terrible saying that because it's just someone reading a book, but I struggle to tell the difference between her voice when she's voicing the protagonist and the different voices she chooses for like the men, for example. There's not much difference between each of them, but then also some of the voices she picks for people is really like grating when they're supposed to be a really lovely character. And so I ended up switching from the audiobook to the digital book and just reading it because it just was grating on my nerves. And it's crazy how some of the characters, like Nehemia, really did not get into from the audiobook, but from the digital book, the ebook, I really actually loved her and felt like she was a completely different character in my mind. And so she ended up classing those books as ebooks and not as audiobooks because I couldn't deal with it, honestly. And then 29% of them are print, which is the ones from here. And we get to the most read authors. Okay, here you can see Sarah J Maas is definitely top for the books that I've read this year. I've never read a Sarah J Maas book until this year, and I've read 11 so far, so that makes sense. The next person is Jennifer L. Armentrout. Hers is the series that I was talking about before, where I didn't love the first book, moved on to the second book, and it was so much better, and then it just got like worse and worse and worse from there. This is the Blood and Ash series. Ironically, this was actually a graphic audio book that I listened to first. Didn't love the protagonist's voice. It was fine. I didn't feel like the accent fit with the character so well. And so I ended up switching to ebooks for the other ones. And it just, I felt like the series was fine. There were a few redeeming parts of the books, but in general, it wasn't something that I was enjoying investing time in. And I think especially if you know anything about the series, I'm not going to ruin it, but there's like a huge dividing point in the fourth book that people either seem to continue with the series because of that, or they leave the series because of that. Super, super controversial. And to be honest, I feel like it was such a small part of the book, I didn't really care about it so much. It was something that happened. I personally wouldn't do that myself, but to each their own. The writing style and the storyline was just not gripping enough for me to like continue pushing through, especially because it's an unfinished series and people seem to be like, even if they've pushed through but they didn't like the controversial thing, they have then continued on quite critical of the series. And for example, the 5th book in the series was pretty much just a recap of the first book but from a different perspective, and it just felt like it was too complicated and I wasn't enjoying it, so I did leave that series unfinished. And then John Green, I always read tons of his books, so I'm not surprised that's on there. 3 of the Wheel of Time series are on here, of course. I'm not surprised about that. That's a series that I'm currently working through. And then the Holly Black books. Everyone else seems to just be one book from that author, and so it just hasn't like listed them. I did have a huge spike in March because I got sick. I got sick for like 2 weeks and all I could do was listen to audiobooks because my eyes were really, really inflamed and sore, so I couldn't like stare at a screen and look for too long. I was also pretty dizzy, and so looking at a screen or trying to read a book was just a lot. Whereas I felt like that's when I got introduced to graphic audio and when I went through all of the Akatar books, which is another reason why I want to reread them, because I was very sick when I read them and I loved them, but I was very sick, and so I feel like there are probably aspects of it that I missed. In March, I read many books. 13 books in March. That's wild. I did not expect that. Go me. And then I have to say I'm kind of surprised at my rating system. I'm very pleasantly surprised because as I rate things, I generally feel like I'm a very high rater of books. Like I think it's very easy for a book to get to 4 stars for me. It's hard for a book to get above 4 stars. Below 3 stars, I'm like never touching that book again and never recommending it to anyone. But even then, I'd rather DNF it than finish it generally if it's below 3 stars. And so I'm kind of not surprised that there is not much below 3 stars. There's in fact only one book, which I'm kind of curious what it is. It's complicated. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that was one of the beach reads that I read. It was so good. It was honestly like a 4.5 from pretty early on. The last 10 to 15% of the book sucked. Like it was such a letdown for me, and that's what pushed it all the way down to a 2.5 because it was so, it was one of those things where it's like the storyline was really exactly what you were wanting out of a summer read, and then probably because there's not going to be a follow-up book, the author kind of caved and crushed everything that you expect from like a series into the final 10%, and it just felt like it ruined the vibe of the book, and it was totally against the characters that she had set up at the beginning of the book. So that was a total letdown, but everything else is pretty smooth out. I like up and down quite a lot. I'm quite surprised. It does make me feel a bit better about my rating system because I honestly thought it was just going to be a huge steep up to 4 stars in the middle. I do have 3 5-star books, which I'm kind of surprised about. I very hesitantly give out 5-star books unless like I cannot stop thinking about it for days and days, even months afterwards. I'm like finishing the book and going and scrolling on social media to see what other people have said about the book and like looking up fan art. I generally cry in the book and I'm highlighting all throughout it. Like there is pretty strict criteria for me to get 5 stars for a book. Unsurprisingly, 2 of them were Akatar books, which like I was saying earlier, I do feel like there is a certain part of me that really appreciates the hard fantasy, but it never like hits as hard as some of these romantasy books have hit for me. So like A Wings in Ruin, I was sobbing. This was kind of near the end of my sickness, and I remember I was actually doing my nails at home at the time, and I had to stop because the section, I'm not going to ruin it, but the section with her father revealing something that you didn't previously expect to happen, and the naming of certain things, I'm going to leave it at that, but the naming of certain things was like the ultimate like bawling my eyes out moment I've had in a book for a really long time. I'm someone who's super critical of family moments and family relationships. I think that they can either make or break a book. And so I often don't read books to do with family dynamics. I feel like it's generally the romance is the main focus of the book, but I surprisingly did not expect that ACOTAR had such a family component to it that was as well written as I expected it to be. And so that scene in A Court of Wings and Ruin was just like death for me. And then of course how A Court of Wings and Ruin not ends, but like the ending where you think it's ended but it hasn't actually ended yet, I was like death. And I assume that part of it is because of graphic audio, because it was just so well written and explained and like acted, I guess you could say, that it was just like, oh my gosh. I was shocked and I just could not deal for a very long time after that. It took me a while, but then I eventually went back to A Court of Silver Flames. I was very hesitant because people, again, seem to be super divided on this book, whether they love it or hate it. And because the main storyline ends with A Court of Frost and Starlight, I didn't feel like I needed to push straight on to the next one. And I was feeling a little bit emotionally dead, I have to say, after that whole like storyline. But I moved on to A Court of Silver Flames later on, and that also ended up being a 5-star for me. I feel like I have never felt so seen in a book before, which is crazy because it's like, it's a romantasy book. And so there's stuff in this book that does not exist in our real world. But reading this and hearing her struggle with mental health was like the most gut-wrenching, probing experience that I've ever had. And I just like, oh my gosh, I got to the end of the book and I was, I think, torn apart. And I think because of the emotional aspect of it, because of all of the like bookmarking and the highlighting of segments, the fact that I could not stop thinking about this book for the longest time. Like I still think about this book and that I want to reread this book has got me like, it's got me good. And so I gave it a 5 stars. And so yeah, I'm kind of shocked that I've got 3 5 stars out of this whole year of books, but I'm really happy with that. I have got 6 4.75, and this is where it's like, I know that I'm someone who struggles to give 5 stars to a book because that means that you wouldn't correct like anything. There are a lot of books in here that I really, really loved, but there was just like one little thing that was pulling me back. And so I'm not surprised that more of them are in the 4.75 stars, but I'm curious to get to the end of the year and see how this is divvied out more and if it has just gone more into that like 4.75 stars section. Yeah, that seems to be everything on my list. I know that this has been a really long video. It's been so nice to go through this and see like where things are tracking, and the fact that I have read this many pages in books by this point in the year. I am looking forward to some more books that I'm going to be reading this year. I read a book, I actually got gifted for Christmas a book by a friend of mine called Fear the Flames. This is a romantasy book and I gave it a 4.75 stars. I loved this book, and when it finished on such a cliffhanger. The second book, thankfully, is actually coming out today, and so I've pre-ordered it, but I've stupidly pre-ordered it from a bookshop which I've just googled. It's really notorious for not getting your pre-orders there like on time. And so I'm not going to be pre-ordering with them again, because for the last like 4 books that I've pre-ordered, it's never come on time. Even though they have it on the shelves, they don't fulfill your pre-order first, which is so irritating. But anyway, the second book has technically come out today. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it today, but it has come out today, and I'm very excited for that. I also was given this book for Christmas. I had a lot of like book giving things this year, and again, it's in the fantasy realm, and so I'm really, really looking forward to this. I had a friend tell me that it wasn't as like romantasy as they wanted it to be, and there weren't enough dragons apparently. So I'm curious to see how this plays out, but I've been seeing this book everywhere, and so I've really wanted to read this book, and honestly that seems to be the majority of it. I have bought the Crescent City series and it's currently on its way. It did get stuck at customs, so I don't know if I'm gonna get that anytime soon, but it was like a birthday present to myself, and I'm looking forward to those coming through because, like I said, I listened to them graphic audio and I would love to reread them again. I'm also gonna go through and commit to like spooky season this year, and either I'm going to reread the Harry Potter series, which I really want to do, or I'm gonna go down more of the more like dystopian side of things. I do need to continue with the Chaos Walking series, and then also King of Scars. I know it's not dystopian, but I need to continue with. But yeah, no, there's so many books on this bookshelf and I'm very excited. I've also started reading Powerless, which is another romantasy book which is famous on TikTok. I held off for a really long time. Also Caravel. I bought that when I was in America. I really wanted to get like a Target exclusive book, and they didn't have any at the Target that I went to when I was in America, but this has Target on the sticker on the front cover, so it's kind of reminding me of my time there. Plus I've never seen the copy of this book that has like the underlapping cover so you can see the thing underneath. I thought that was quite cool, and so I'm excited to read this book as well. But Powerless, I'm like 20% of the way through and I'm really enjoying so far. Yeah, no, I feel like I'm feeling so good about books this year. I'm really in a good place with them at the moment, and I feel like it's really turned into a hobby again that I'm spending a lot of time on and like enjoying being immersed in these worlds outside of my work. So yeah, thanks for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Maybe it's given you some interesting inspiration for books to read this year, but thank you for watching, and I will see you with another video very soon. Bye! Thank you.